morning. Sorry. Okay. Hope Bonnie's up and able to watch this morning. We got her Jim here with us this morning. But certainly we'll miss you, Bonnie, if you're out there able to watch. Jim says hi over here. I hope everybody's had a good week. It's been a little bit hot, and I think it's going to get a little bit hotter and a little bit hotter all week.
Nice being dry.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of maybe needing a little rain, but not on my yard, I hope. I'm going to slow down a little bit. I've had it with mowing for this year. But we'll get started this morning. I don't know if how long we'll end up on this lesson, but wanted to backtrack just a little bit. If y'all like me, don't remember what you did yesterday, much less last week, or about 5 minutes ago. But remember last week we started talking about King Solomon and what's, as soon as you hear King Solomon, what comes in your mind? What is it about Solomon? Well, that's that's what I was looking for, but you hit the nail. He built a temple, his great wisdom. His great wisdom, but yeah. Yeah, he kind of, she let the cat out of the bag a little bit. His great wisdom didn't last for long. But last week we saw where the Queen of Sheba traveled. They're not sure exactly what country she did come from, but traveled 1,500 miles to take a look at his kingdom because it was known worldwide at the time of his wisdom, of his wealth, of his riches, of the way he ran his kingdom, the way he treated his people. And remember, she came and she even came and stayed with him, and it said that he answered every question. He just let her ask and see everything in the kingdom that she had wanted to see. And remember, we talked about that by her pursuing this wisdom, which is what we should do as Christians, not pursue the wisdom of a man, but pursue the Lord as, he was a symbol, and pursue it as she pursued that wisdom. And remember, when she came, she said that she wasn't disappointed, that it was even better than was told to her. And we also related that back to the kingdom of heaven and pursuing the kingdom of heaven. And as Miss Bowen pointed out to us, heaven's going to be better than the best thoughts and the sometimes, like when you read and it'll talk about the streets of gold and you think of the emeralds and the rubies and all the things that are just kind of just commonplace, like an asphalt here. But the other night, I don't know what I was doing, but I came in the living room and I turned on the TV and it was still on the Christian TV channel from earlier that day, and it was a Victory Baptist Church, I'm not sure, but they were calling it a victory tour is what it was. And it was a concert, and they were singing and praising, and it was so good to turn on the TV, and they were all standing, singing, shouting, versus what TV shows are usually on the TV, or we're throwing a rock through the TV or something. But it made me think in that minute, a lot of times we equate heaven to, how beautiful and the gold, that'll look. But it just made me think then where we had been talking about it, of the beauty of just being there, of the praise is what it was. And just because I was thinking, I don't know where those people are, but it would be so wonderful to be in there with them. That it was young people praising and they were lifting their hands and jumping and just think of that's what heaven is. it's nothing about take aside all the other things, but just imagine being there and the feeling of being there and just the spiritual feeling of being there is, and I think that's another thing that the Bible's telling us we can't even imagine how good it is to be there.
Years ago, the Nazarene, were on these horses. There used to be
Noise.
a lot of shouting going on. And, in our day and age, you see the lot of the church, people get blessed, and there was a lot of shouting. In fact, we used to see a lot of the altar.
I can remember a man that came here, and when you were saying that, I thought of his name, and but he would just take off around the church, and the spirit was just touchable, palpable, as they say, or whatever. It was just, and that's something we miss. I mean, I think we, I don't know if we bottle it up or we're, I don't know, just don't do it like people used to.
Just be still.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's a good two-step. Yeah. Maybe literally and spiritually. Thanks, Jim. So, Bonnie will have to take care of you on that one. So, but we see from Solomon the rise. He had the wisdom. He had all these things. He had it all from the looks of it. He had, and he led his kingdom at that time after the Lord. I wanted to read, if y'all don't care to get your Bible, at least where I wrote it down. If we'll look in Exodus chapter 23, and I wanted to read to y'all verse 20 to 33. So Exodus. I got the bigger Bible where it's there. But if we remember, the Jews were in captivity for a little over 400 years, captive of the Egyptians. And, the Egyptians had a lot of false gods at the time. And when they say when you're in Rome, you do as the Romans or whatever. So they were captive of that nation who had all those false gods of the sun, so that was a part of a society that they were held captive and in the midst of. And when the Lord brought them out of Egypt, He brought them out as His people, and He gave them laws and He gave them rules that they were to abide by. And for years He had given them. He had given them Moses, and He had given them Joshua, and they kind of led the nation, not as a king, but as appointed by the Lord as their counsel. But you remember at one point that the people decided that they wanted to have a king like all the other nations. That they no longer wanted to have these judges as the Lord had appointed. That they wanted to have a king because that's what everybody else had a king, and they wanted a king to rule over them. And the Lord gave them their king. He didn't want to do that, but that's what they kept clamoring. They wanted a king, and He said, this king is going to require that you pay taxes. He's going to require that you give your men into service for him. Personal service, military service, and are you sure that you know what you're asking for? And that's what, and then they got Saul, and Saul had his downfall. He started in a position with the Lord, but he turned his eyes. David, we see, he was a man after the Lord's own heart, and he had issues as he was king, but But David died in a close relationship to the Lord. David repented. That was the thing. It didn't. We found out that David wasn't a perfect man, and we can't. None of us are perfect. The Bible says not one of us is perfect except Jesus. And we've seen that in these great men. So now we're going to look at Exodus chapter 23, starting at verse 20. And this is what, as they are leaving out of Egypt and that they are starting to be known as the Jewish nation, these are some of the rules, the parameters that he's saying, that this is what my people will do. So I'm going to read verse 20 to 33, if my voice will hold up for me. It says, "Behold, I send an angel before you to keep you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared." So you remember he had promised them a promised land, which was Canaan, and he said, "I've sent an angel before you. Beware of him and obey his voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if you indeed obey his voice and do all that I speak, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off. You shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their works, but you shall utterly overthrow them and completely break down their sacred pillars." So he's telling them, I'm going to take you up against all these people that are in this land that have already made this as a homestead, but that I'm going to protect you and I'm going to fight for you. But he says, you shall not bow down to their gods nor serve them, no, do according to their works. And it says, and completely break down their sacred pillars, so that they had idols that they were set up that they were worshiping. And he's like, don't let them stay. When you go in, take your bulldozer and smash them to smithereens. It says, so you shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of you. No one shall suffer miscarriage or be barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. Good promises. Good promises. I will send my fear before you. I will cause confusion among all the people to whom you come, and will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. So he's gonna scare the people before they even come there. And I'm sure they feel weak and inadequate of what they're about to do. But he's saying, I'm going to scare them up, so they're going to, as soon as they see you. And I will send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite from before you. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the beasts of the fields become too numerous for you. Little by little I will drive them out from before you until you have increased and you inherit the land. And think about that. He's going to scare these people. He's going to drive them out. But he's even thought, he could have cleared the whole land out. But he's saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to drive them out as much as you can handle. But so as, if he totally cleared the land and then the animals took over and everything went back to woods and stuff. So he's taking care of them just as much as they can handle as they move it. But he expects them to keep moving in. He's not, I'm going to stop these one people and you move in. But he expects them to keep moving, and he's going to make way for them to do it. And he says, little by little I will drive them out until you have increased and you inherit the land. So the same with us in the Christian walk. He expects them to keep moving ahead and growing. He doesn't expect them to stay the people they are, but he expects them to grow and to increase in his strength as he helps them do it. It says, and I will set your bounds from the Red Sea to the sea Philistia, and from the desert to the river. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. So this is what these people were brought into. This land it's called flowing with milk and honey, a great land that has been tamed, that has been, remember he said, I'll bring you to houses you haven't built. So they're going into a place that's already has great things growing on it, and he's promising, I'm going to take you there. These people may look strong to you, and remember how fortified Jericho was, and that, they shouldn't have been able to breach the walls. But he's saying, I'm going to take you in those places, but, you are not to serve their gods. You are to continue to follow me and only me. And he says, and don't leave them there because they're going to be a snare. Don't leave one weed in your garden that blooms out and seeds because it's going to drop. I have these huckleberries. I don't know what they're called. It's in my field. I think I've about got every one of them. But if you leave one out and it seeds out, then it doesn't matter how good it brings them back, and then they get your horses there and you have to pick them out. But just leaving one and not bothering it is dangerous. So you think I'm gonna quit and I'm gonna change my life, but there's one little bad portion that that it can keep cropping up, and you can have to deal with it over and over. Like as we've studied, these people that were in this land, that they just came against them. So these were the rules that were given to the Jewish people. Solomon was a very wise man. So we know that Solomon knew that this was one of the things that the Lord had promised, is I will bring you into this land, but you don't serve other gods. So we'll get started with our lesson. The name of the lesson today is Solomon's Sin. The golden text comes from 1 Corinthians 10. It says, in verse 12, wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. So we can't get ever too sure in what we're doing, because we are humans with faulty nature that tends to lead us into things we shouldn't do. The lesson aim, it says, no one ever reaches the place where he need not be watchful lest he fall into sin. So, we get older and wiser, hopefully, but never too wise. This scripture is going to come out of 1 Kings, verse 11, 1 through 13. I guess I'll go ahead and read it. And like I say, we from last week to this week, we're going to see a major change in Solomon, our king that we're studying. It says, but King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Amorites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. And I don't know if I said any of those correctly. It says, of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, you shall not go into them, neither shall they come into you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. Then did Solomon build a high place for Shamash, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burned incense and sacrifices unto their gods. And the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice, and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. But he kept not which the Lord commanded. Wherefore the Lord said unto Solomon, Forasmuch as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. Notwithstanding in the days, I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Howbeit, I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. I wonder that in the introduction, it kind of summed it up pretty good in this first sentence, and here it says, if we have ecstatically rejoiced in the previous lessons of this quarter, there is a drench of tears and an ecstasy of heartache in this last lesson on Solomon's career. So, Solomon, like we said last week, it was all grand and good and everything he did, and we see it. There's really been a turnabout of the whole everything in his life at this point. Starting in chapter 11 of verse Kings, there's one, but King Solomon loved many strange women together with the daughters of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and the Hittites. So they called them strange women. They were probably strange in more ways than one, but they were strangers to the Jewish nation. They were strangers to the worship of the one and only true God. It says, as he exceeded other kings in glory, wisdom, and power, so must he excel them not only in armies, chariots, and horses, but also in number of wives. So this must have been because he had a massive, we'll go over a number of wives. So this must have been another of the things of his kingdoms that he gathered up, and it had to be the most glorious and the most fabulous of anything around him. That he couldn't be beaten by the kings. Says of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, you shall not go into them, neither shall they come into you, for surely they will turn away your heart to thetheir gods. Solomon clave to them in love. So Solomon was just in love. he could, remember when you first got your teenager and you just get married and your parents try to tell you, no, don't marry this person, you're just in love. Okay. My grandson right now. Yeah. He must have some good vitamins. Oh, no. My grandson's between girlfriends right now, so I try to talk to him while he's logical, and maybe we'll listen to a couple words. But Solomon, but he clave to these in love. So above all his wisdom and everything else, this has kind of overrun his good senses. It says, some think it was in policy that he married these foreigners, by them to get intelligence of the state of these countries, or perhaps to keep peaceable relations by marrying. So it very well could have been that he married all these women from all these different nations for those two reasons, that he either kind of make his headway into there and become friends with them. It said he had the daughter of the Pharaoh. So that would, when your son-in-law's the king, you would kind of hope till you did something bad that you might be pretty good buddies. But also by having these women, we see too that he could have had an opportunity to have a little bit of spy work going on. That she's probably going to go home and back and tell what's going on. So it could have started out as a kind of a diplomatic thing he was doing, that he was, as he was building his nation, that he was using these things to help him build his nation, not just that necessarily at first that he was in love with all of them, but that, that he had he had a bigger picture in his mind that he was thinking as he took them. Says he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. I had never known this before. I didn't know exactly what it meant. The lesson says that concubines were wives of the second rank. So I don't know if they were just women he wanted to marry, but he didn't quite think that he was in love with them as wives of the first rank, or maybe they got favors and the other ones not quite so much, but he had 700 plus more, so that's enormous. And the lesson writer also said, polygamy has ever been a snare to rulers. Scriptures tell us of misery it has occasioned. Witness the families of Abraham. Remember Abraham wanted a child. Sarah was old, couldn't have a child. Ended up having a child by the can't think of the lady that took care of them. Servant. I yelled at a servant woman. Remember that turned out really bad. He wasn't the promised child, and they said there would be friction between those two nations forever and ever. I think that's part of that. That didn't work out so well.
See that going on today?
Yes, it's still. Jacob, remember, he had a different mother from all his brothers. His daddy tended to love him, gave him his coat of many colors. Really changed Jacob's life. The Lord had a hand in it and took care of him. I'm thinking Elkanah, I can't remember because of his other wives. It talks about David, who we remember was Bathsheba. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. He had plenty wives already at the time, and then he saw Bathsheba, and it really destroyed a part of him. The child died. So Solomon was the second child of that union. So he has been a part of this polygamy that has caused his dad a lot of heartbreak in his life. And in verse 4 it says, "For it came to pass when Solomon was old, that his wife turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father." And I guess I hadn't noticed this as much, or maybe I wasn't old when I studied this before, but it says, "For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wife turned his heart." You would think, because Solomon was a wise man, that you become wiser generally as you get older. And you would think that would have been the same for Solomon, but apparently Solomon had his zenith and wisdom as his youth. And it said as he was old, these wives. So he really appears to go backwards in his old age. And they said, sometimes people get comfortable and they think because they're older, they do have wisdom and they have it all together. And these things that would have been a snare to me when I was a young man aren't going to be because I'm old and wise now. But apparently, if we look at Solomon, that's not true.
It's possible too, right? I mean, as Solomon was getting older, and God was seeing that he was sinning more and more and more. God finally just stripped his rank of his wisdom.
That he just didn't have it. Apparently he didn't have this. And it was talking about too that as he had all these, it says it would have taken an enormous amount of wealth to build all these heathen temples. So it started these choices that Solomon had made. even started taxing and taking a toll on the kingdom as a whole, not just Solomon and what it did to him, but as he had these heathen gods. And the people of the Jewish nation, they were putting their taxes and their money and their had to go toward these things to do this. So he was not only making that decision for himself, but he was taking the money of this nation that was supposed to be God's nation and providing for these women. And you're talking about you're talking about a lot of different heathen gods that he was taking, and he was taking care of in this. And he had taken it upon his wise self to do these things and had made decisions.
It said with age came self-confidence. He lost the confidence in himself, and then the wives just kind of, they had their opportunity to step in there.
To take that. He wasn't focusing on the Lord and gaining his wisdom and confidence.
Probably already knew that he blew it. I'd say. It's all the things he done.
Imagine 700 wives telling what to do.
Yeah.
He didn't have time to worry about it.
You got that right.
His honey-do list got really big.
Yeah.
Expensive.
And started costing the country, and if he had gotten a lot of wealth, but it took a lot of these things. It says in verse 5, for Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, after Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites. And I looked up abomination, and it says abomination is anything that causes disgust or hatred. So we see these gods that he went after, the Lord hated them, and it was a disgust and an abomination in his eyes. So this wasn't a small thing that Solomon was doing against him. It was one of the main things that he told him not to do. And in verse 6 it says, and Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord and went not fully after the Lord as did David his father. We saw that David did some evil things to the Lord, but David repented of the things he done. David saw that he was doing wrong. Apparently Solomon was past seeing this stuff. He had gotten so involved and so I guess willing to set up these idols and these wives probably had him go and worship at these places, with him. It says, then did Solomon build high place for Shemosh, the abomination of Moab, and the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burned incense and sacrifices unto their gods. So this was just a mention of a couple that he did, but he had 700. And at the time there were Egyptians that had innumerable gods that they did. So he has done this, and the Bible is saying that for many, many times. And then these women burnt incense and sacrifice. And Solomon had been the one that had been given the charge to build God's temple. So he had built the temple, the holy God. David wasn't allowed to do it. The Lord wouldn't let David build it. He let Solomon. But then Solomon turned around after he built the temple to the holy God and built innumerable temples to all these false gods. And in verse 9 it says, and the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart had turned from the Lord, the God of Israel, which had appeared to him twice. So, Solomon had a relationship with the Lord. It just wasn't something that was fly by night. The Lord had met with him in a dream and had given him this wisdom that he had left all his life. But now it's saying, and the Lord was angry with Solomon. And that's a pretty, hard statement. You don't, I want the Lord's favor, not the Lord's displeasure toward him. And I think as a nation, it talks about the Lord will bless those who bless Israel. And I think that's the crux of this nation is our choice of how we handle Israel, whether we back Israel or whether we back away from Israel. You know, I just,
I
it's
always
why,
said, better leave Israel alone,
yeah,
better leave them alone.
and then, you know, our leadership should very much take into account, you know, how our relationship, how we're willing to aid them when needed. Because, you know, as we see, the Lord is very close and personal close, that, you know, there's either great jubilation or there's anger if there's not.
I think the comments there, back to verse 6, should be a warning to us too. Wise man be at his belt. And in the comments that in the 6th verse says, he grew cool and indifferent in his own religion. His heart was not perfect with the Lord his God. He left his first love, lost his zeal for God. To me, that just kind of winds up the result. I mean, that's where he's being failed at right there.
Was it? And he was the wisest of the wise. So if it can
It
happen
should
to
be a
him,
warning to us. You gotta, you gotta be careful. You gotta get close to the Lord and be obedient to him, and not only your first love or your zeal for the Lord.
and, you know, like she says, you can't back off and not serve the Lord, not be involved. As you know, with the relationship, it's not going to last if you don't spend any time, if you don't spend time in your Bible. That you are, if the wisest man can cool off, like she says, and back away, then, you know, then what are the rest of us? I mean, we have to keep that alive and keep that.
Now, where he built, you know, where he had built a great temple, you know, Solomon did. They could have been the flaw of him right there, because I mean, that was one of his greatest accomplishments. So his other wives, you know, they probably told him, so you built this great temple, why don't you build me one, you know? And I mean, he already did a great thing, so now he had an idle mind, he said, well, I can build this kind of a temple, I can build you something well, you know,
And he listened to him, like you
yeah,
said.
not the big man, oh yeah, I can build it.
I guess, true. I mean, and he did, apparently think he could take it upon himself after this to do.
Don't you think though that the devil knows Solomon's weakness, and he
Oh, yeah.
is well on that. And when you don't reject the devil, well, that's what happens.
Yeah.
I'm not just kidding now.
And I mean, and he knew these women were his weakness, and I guess since he was such a wise man, he threw 700 plus women at him to change and
Get reload.
yeah, and the devil knows our weakness.
Okay.
I mean, and that's what he comes after us with.
Yours may be something.
Yeah.
But he knows that he too.
Yeah. No, I don't want 700 husbands.
Just one time.
Verse 11, it says, whereas the Lord said unto Solomon, for as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. Remember, he had promised David that there would be a king in his family line, you know, as long as they served him. And the word is, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee. You know, and I'm thinking of rend, like he says take of it, but I guess rend, it's like when you kind of beat somebody down and you rip it away from them, if you have to break their arm to get it out their arm. I mean, it's not going to be a nice, kind, hand it over kind of thing. It's going to be, I'll take it from you. You hide it behind your back, I'll break your arm. That, you know, so the Lord has anger with him. It says in verse 12, notwithstanding in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. So he's, you know, the Lord remembers David's repentant heart toward him, and his promises toward David. So he tells Saul, you know, because of your father and because of your father's love for me and that he served me throughout his life, I won't do this to you, but I will take it out of the hand of your son. And hopefully, you know, I mean, that would have to get Solomon thinking. We don't know that he changed or how he left. He says, howbeit I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one child to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen. So this thing which he has chosen to do has affected the whole kingdom. You know, it's not something that's just Solomon's going to pay for. The whole kingdom's going to pay for these decisions and these things that he's done. And you know in several lessons before that we've studied, that things that have happened and things these decisions these rulers have made have affected their kingdom, their families. I mean, you know, remember David's family went into a horrible turmoil with his children and their deaths and stuff afterwards. So some of the bad decisions we make don't stop with us. Y'all want to take a couple minutes and answer a couple questions? See if Angie's been listening since you've been camping. It says what seem to be the reasons why Solomon chose so many wives. His weakness. And it said that possibly he could have been doing it to make friends.
Relationship with other nations.
Yeah, with relationships, maybe even spy relationships. We're not sure. It says, what warning had God given concerning taking heathen wives?
The law forbids.
Yeah, in the law, I mean, that it was a forbidden thing that they, it says what was the consequences of Solomon's taking, I like to call them strange wives. The consequence was everything. It was Solomon standing, and in the end, it was the Jewish nation as a whole. The consequences were. Should we hold liberal views of false religions? It's black or white.
It's encouraging the spreading of the strange.
What are the differences between David and Solomon's attitude toward God? Yeah, we never read or saw in here that Solomon repented or was sorry about what he did. He didn't say. I guess we've got an answer. It says what was Solomon's punishment? It was pretty much that the kingship was taken out of his family. The whole nation was changed from there. Or the nation was weakened from there forward. It was in a whole lot weaker state after that, and finally, as we know, fell. Thank you all.
If I don't have my
I don't know, you don't stand.
Well, now you don't think Angie would
Okay.
check that.
You go stand up like
that.
I said, yeah, you're two citizens.